Thank you, Antonio. Can I have my presentation on the screen, please? Thank you. So I would like to thank first all the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to be here today. So I will speak about the way we think children could be educated for sustainability, and the way we do that within La Main à la Pâte Foundation. So the key role of education has been already highlighted.
Perhaps can you speak louder?
Sorry. And the key role of education has been already highlighted by different speakers today for sustainability. Let's say that first, that high quality education is a prerequisite for reducing inequalities, for example, or also that education is a key for promoting behavioral change and providing citizens with skills for addressing critical issues for sustainable development. But education for sustainable development is not only education, and it's a way for students to acquire knowledge, skills, and values necessary to shape a sustainable future and to solve problems, and if possible, in a collaborative way. This approach may seem rather consensual, but actually it's not the case. A lot of educators don't want at all their children or their pupils to be educated to sustainable development because they argue that education for something, for sustainable development, for example, is a contradiction. It's inconsistent with the goal of education, that is to help students to think for themselves. So if we want to educate them for something, they think it's inconsistent with that. And this kind of reaction, we can understand that, is connected to the fact that education for sustainable development is quite new, and it's a rupture in the educational systems for different reasons. The first one is that education for sustainable development is not a disciplinary approach, but a thematic approach. And as a consequence, it doesn't have any formal curriculum for the school, so there is no possibility for the educational system to assess the knowledge and the skills that are developed through this project. And secondly, education for sustainable development is closely linked to controversial issues that might challenge the representation held by the teachers themselves, or the students, or the parents. And so it can generate a controversial debate that does not exist in classical lessons, or if it exists only at a very small scale in more traditional teachings. And finally, education for sustainable development explicitly targets behavioral change and the adoption of good practices in close connection with ethical values, whose appropriation is deemed important. But denying the fact that there is a legitimacy problem with education for sustainable development can lead to unwanted shortcuts and damaging practices. Education for sustainable development could become a set of prescriptions of promoting political correctness. And it is very important to keep this in mind if we want education for sustainable development to be accepted and to develop pedagogical approaches that give a great place to debate and to construction of knowledge or contents. We all know, and every single teacher has already noticed, that at least in developed countries, most of the students, even at primary school, already know the basics challenges of sustainable development. Almost every student already know something about global warming, biodiversity, waste, water problems, etc. Indeed, pupils are exposed and almost saturated with this kind of messages in the television, on the internet, in magazines, and so on. But most often, the images, the articles they are exposed to focus essentially on the emotional aspect. This is because it's a good way to reach their audience. Emotion is a very powerful engine for motivation. I will just say a few words about a study that have been made a few years ago in a French contest, where the researchers have shown that the more emotionally close students are to a subject, the more difficult they encounter in dealing with their own specific scientific aspects. They have a lot of difficulties to analyze their own misconceptions. They have difficulties to think critically, and they have difficulties to acquire knowledge if they are too close to the subject on an emotional point of view. So emotion is important, at least for motivating students, but we have to take care, because overexpression of affect can curb critical reasoning and hence the resistance of the students, and sometimes blind them. So this is why it's important to provide pupils with an alternative way away from the emotion-only register. And school seems the good place to do that. And without ignoring values and so on, the science education should play a key role for sustainable development. I will say a few words about the pedagogical vision of La Main à la Pâte, but La Main à la Pâte is not the only operation promoting inquiry-based science education. During the last 2 decades, a lot of academies of sciences, governments, and international institutions had led to the conclusion that we have to renew the way we teach science at school. And with basically two main ideas. The first is that science education should come very early. Let's say we should start at least at the age of 5, for example. And second principle, that inquiry should be present in science education. So basically, science education, or inquiry-based science education, consider that science is not only a set of statements that we have to learn by heart, but science is an activity. And it's an activity that can be made by the pupils themselves and not by the teacher in front of the pupils. They can make observation, they can ask questions, they can come back to their previous knowledge in the light of experimental evidence, and they can use tools to gather, analyze, interpret data, propose answers, communicate the results. So the mastering of the oral and written language is particularly important in inquiry-based science education. This approach of science education can help students to understand complex systems that are inherently present in sustainable development issues. Biodiversity is a good example of a complex system because there is not one single and linear effect of a single cause. We must understand the complexity of the system in order to be able to act on its conservation. So, understanding biodiversity, for example, implies understanding the concept of ecosystem, meaning the interaction between living species and non-living environment, the interaction between living species themselves, and also the interaction between non-living environments themselves. I mean, for example, what happened in the ice polar belt may affect other areas in the world. And then the complexity of the system can be understood as well of its resilience to major perturbation like climate change or pollution or introduction of a new species. Last, it's important that children and adults be aware of the importance of biodiversity for our own well-being. Biodiversity offers a lot of services to mankind. Inquiry-based science education can evolve and take into account the specificity of education for sustainable development, especially the need for an interdisciplinary approach. Excessive specialization introduces division in students' minds and prevent them from making a relationship between the knowledge they acquire in different disciplines. And sometimes they have difficulties even when they become adult to make the link between what they have learned and their daily life. So it requires a complete change in the habits of most of the teachers. They have to learn project-based education, collaborative work. They have to shift completely from a transmission of knowledge to cooperative problem solving by the students themselves, etc., etc. And so if we want to achieve this way of doing sustainable development education, it's critical that we put the stress on professional development of teachers. During the last decade, La Main à la Pâte has launched a lot of pedagogical projects, or large-scale pedagogical projects. I will just show you one example of such a project. This one is called The Climate, My Planet and Me, and it deals with climate change. It has been launched in 2008. It's a completely interdisciplinary program offering a lot of opportunities for hands-on activities, document studies, experiment, debates, and so on. And it doesn't need any specific or costly material for the school. So the pupils will study the evidence of the climate change, let's say the rise of temperature, the ice melting, and so on. And they will investigate the consequences of the climate change. Rise of the sea level, health problem, food security, refugees, biodiversity, and so on. They will realize, for example, here the importance of the polar ice belt, the problem of albedo and the different consequences. And after that, they will investigate the mechanism of greenhouse effect with simple experiment and modelization, and the responsibility of human activities by identifying the role of greenhouse gas and its specific history since the Industrial Revolution. So students will realize the relationship between greenhouse gas and energy consumption, and also we'll realize that there is a close connection between the economic development of countries and greenhouse emissions. So then children will be able to calculate their own carbon footprint and investigate how to reduce CO2 emissions at home or during transportation, for example, or in the supermarket. And they will identify by themselves good practices, good meaning that they have chosen these practices as to be good. It's not the teacher who said this is good. And they will choose which ones they want and which ones they are able to apply in their daily life. So as we have seen with Mr. Brown a few minutes ago, Mr. von Braun, sorry, a few minutes ago, children can also be agents for change, at least in their families, but also in the community. We built a lot of different projects around climate change, like this one for ecological housing, dealing with materials, insulation, orientation, the use of non-carbon energy at home, etc., etc. Another project about transportation, which is also a thematic that is closely linked with climate change. And just a few weeks ago, we launched this new project about ocean. And basically, almost each time a class is doing the project about the climate change, a few weeks after, the class do another project related to housing or transportation or ocean. So we try to have a systemic approach, accompany the teachers involved in the project, thanks to collaborative websites, thanks to specific training sessions, dedicated to teachers and teacher trainers. And the basic idea is that we want them to improve their scientific knowledge, but also that we want them to be more comfortable with inquiry-based science education. So we put them in real situation, as we suppose that their own students will be. And this is quite successful. This systemic approach allows this project to lead to a good success. I mean, in approximately 1 decade, just for these 4 projects, climate change, housing, transportation, and ocean, we have reached approximately 40,000 classes, meaning approximately 1 million students spending approximately, it's an average, but approximately 12 hours on each project. So it's quite a good success, but it's not, we have also still work to do. And we have built different education for sustainable development projects, in addition to climate change and so on, dealing with science, health education, like these 3 subjects about health connected to sun overexposure, or connected to nutrition, or connected to the usage of screens. This project about screen, brain, and child will be presented tomorrow in deep detail by Elena Pasquinelli. We also have different projects for biodiversity, also for natural disasters. And the total impact of Lama La Pâte project on sustainable development education is more than 100,000 classes, meaning approximately 2 million students just during the last decade. As a conclusion, I would like to put the stress on the fact that the pupils that are now already in the primary and secondary schools are the people who will be facing a completely new world when they will be adults, a world with 9 billion inhabitants, with rapidly evolving context of globalization, environmental damages, increasing inequalities, and so on. So, this is why education for sustainable development have become a priority for developing and developed countries. But it is not so easy to implement because of the specificities of this kind of education, because of the multidisciplinary approach, because of the inquiry-based approach. And so, for 2 decades, Lama La Pâte has experienced that teachers are really willing and even enthusiastic to come to do this kind of project, but they need to be accompanied. They need to be accompanied with proper help, proper teacher training or professional development, and proper pedagogical, high quality and free educational resources. So, thank you.